We have learned so much about leveraging technology to survive and thrive. In our next session, we will learn about the success triangle from business and tech leaders. So the title for the next session is Success Triangle: Technology, Machine, Human. Speaker for this session are Mr. C.P. Gurnani and Mr. Karan Bajwa. Mr. Gurnani led Tech Mahindra's transformation journey and one of the biggest turnarounds of Indian corporate history, the acquisition and merger of Satyam. Mr. Gurnani's endeavors are self-explanatory, which won him numerous accolades that include winning gold at the CEO World Awards 2018 for his organization's WiT Reskilling Initiative and the Business Today Best CEO Awards 2019 in the IT and ITs category. I'm Mr. Bajwa, joined Google in March 2020 and is responsible for driving all revenue and go-to-market operations for Google Cloud's extensive solution portfolio that includes Google Cloud Platform and G Suite. Karan joined Google Cloud from IBM, where he served as Managing Director for India and South Asia. To anchor this session, we have Mr. Nishchay Suri, President, Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa at Edcast. With over 2 decades of experience in consulting and academia, he has worked with a wide array of clients in 25 countries across Asia and the Middle East. In 2005, CNBC recognized him by conferring on him with the title Young Turk, an award for young achievers who were helping shape and transform businesses.
Forces of change are affecting 3 major dimensions of work: the work itself, who does the work, and where the work is done. In today's unprecedented times where disruptions are an everyday thing, agility is the key transformation lever to adapt to these changes. The paradigm shift heralds a new view of organizations from mere machines to living organisms where they both are stable and dynamic at the same time. They design stable backbone elements that evolve slowly and support dynamic capabilities that can adapt quickly to new challenges and opportunities. Success lies at the intersection of 3 different, but necessarily not distinct worlds: rapid technological adoption, human-machine collaboration, and a culture of enablement, openness, and empathy. The power of these worlds is bound together by a unifying force, that is learning. The speed and scale at which organizations are able to upskill and reskill their workforce will determine how quickly they are able to adapt and adjust to this new order of work. The need of the hour is for leaders to embrace the future with grace, accelerate the new normal by leveraging the spectrum of cognitive technologies like AI, and drive human-machine collaboration. I welcome you all to this Power Pack session. The topic of our discussion today: Success Triangle, Technology, Machines, and Humans. CP and Karan, the participants couldn't have asked for a more qualified panel on this subject. Just a little added bit of performance pressure for you. We have divided our discussion today in 3 parts. How does an organization really navigate the shifting tides with agility? The second part, redefining work, rethinking the workforce, reimagining the workplace, and finally, learning at the speed of business. Let's get started with part 1. Now, Bill Gates said, success today requires the agility and drive to constantly rethink, reinvigorate, react, and reinvent. And across the developed and developing world, businesses are battling ever-increasing complexity, new risks, and the need for further compliance as we adapt to the new normal. CP, what are the biggest risks organizations are facing today, and what have emerged as critical priorities and must-win battles for CEOs?
Yes, while COVID-19 will redefine the order in which the Fortune 500 would be written. But remember, the Fortune 500 order has been written fresh every year. And there are a few new entrants, and there are a few people who leave that coveted table. And you are dead right when you quoted Bill Gates and said the success is equal to agility, success is equal to rethink, and success is equal to react or reinvent. I mean, I don't have the exact words that Bill Gates used, but I did catch some of the key words that you used. And since you are using some big words, I'm also going to use a few.
Sure.
I think for every organization, it doesn't matter whether it is Google or Tech Mahindra. Number one is we need to dismantle. We need to get out of our mindsets which says this is the way things were done. And most of us who are going to remain in the new world will have to take that mindset that somebody from an outside is going to come in, whether he comes from an HBS and starts a Facebook, or whether somebody in Sweden starts a Skype. But he is threatening us, and that's why we need to dismantle. Number two is, how do you work in an environment where the world is forcing you to think of diverse actions and diverse strategies? You know, whatever worked in Mountain View in Google is definitely not working 100% in Gurgaon. You can always maintain the core, but that diversity in your own thinking, in your own reaction, I think will define how the business adopts itself to new normal. The third thing, I don't think anybody has a choice. The farmer in Nasik who's trying to sell onions to a guy who's trying to sell salon services to the guy next door who is delivering you 500 grams or 100 grams of jalebi. The need for digitization is now more profound in the post-COVID world. And my belief is that all of us who have to survive or who have to thrive will have to jump on the board of digital transformation. And I do understand that it's not a new word, but the spectrum of new technologies like cloud, cognitive technologies like AI and human-machine collaboration, making our workers and each one of us as individuals a lot more intelligent. Our own benchmarks to deliver customer experiences, I think all of them has to change if we have to marry the three forces in the post-COVID world.
Great. I think that gives us a cue into agility, and clearly in the post-COVID world, agility has been called out as a critical capability that organizations need. Talking of risks, and PwC carried out this interesting global CEO survey very recently, where 53% of CEOs believe that the economy will decline in 2020 versus 29% in 2019. And overregulation continues to be the top threat for organizations even this year. It was as well in 2019. And two new threats, interestingly, CP and Karan, have emerged. Trade conflicts and uncertain economic growth are two new entrants. Now, in the post-COVID world, agile has become the new buzzword. And the mainstream philosophy is to rely on teams undertaking fast-paced, self-led journeys to innovation. Karan, How important is it to be agile, and what are the trademarks of an agile organization?
Look, I think Agile's been on for a while. It's just the dimensions have changed in today's time. It is truly catching on. And there is a growing recognition of the fact that the transformational benefits of Agile far outweigh the pain that you got to go through the migration to an Agile environment. But it is easier said than done. Moving to an agile operating model is not easy, especially for established companies. Agile organizations are fundamentally built differently. Traditional organizations, as most of us know and have worked around ones, are built around a static, a siloed, and a fairly structural hierarchy, whereas agile organizations are characterized as a network of teams operating in really in rapid learning and very fast decision making cycles. Traditional organizations really place their governance bodies at the apex and decision flows down the hierarchy. And conversely, in an agile organization, it instills a common purpose across the organization and they use new data to give decision rights to the teams, and especially teams who are closest to the information or or a customer. An agile organization, in my view, can ideally combine velocity and adaptability with stability and efficiency. That's kind of the how the combination works. And there are really a few key trademarks of being an agile organization. Number one is strategy. The clarity of the strategy is extremely important. And given the fact that now you will have multiple stakeholders in an organization versus just the leadership, that strategies got to be bought in by a very wide variety of people. In the past, we could get away by a few people understanding the strategy and everybody else in execution mode. But now, around agile organizations, you got to have a very strong advocacy around your strategy and getting buy in from literally the last stakeholder on the ground. The second, it needs to have a very a structure to be able to execute on that strategy. Process is extremely important. And then, of course, people form the hallmark of how you're going to bring it alive, and technology makes it easier to implement it. Those are the kind of five trademarks of an agile organization. CP spoke about dismantling, and I'm just going to say it differently. I think deconstructing and unlearning are very important attributes for any organization if it has to transition from being a traditional to an agile organization. And this change has to be led from the leadership. The tone at the top and walking the talk by the leaders is extremely important. And the leadership has to completely leave control and get on to influence. And if I could just cap by saying that agile is an enemy of control and a friend of influence. That's how I see agile being deployed in organizations.
Well said. Great way to conclude that conversation on agility. In fact, McKinsey carried out a quarterly survey of 2,500 business leaders around the world. And 75% of survey responses report that organization agility is a top or a top three priority. And in high tech, telecom, financial services, and media and entertainment, these are the industries that appear to be leading the pack with the greatest number of organizations undertaking agility transformation. I also loved the perspective on clarity. I worked with a founder promoter, and he described strategy as disha and gati, very simply put. And he's talked about clearly it's important to have direction and clarity before you can assume speed. So great perspective there. Let's move on to part two, which is about redefining work, rethinking the workforce, and reimagining the workplace. And William Gibson said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. The notion of work is veering from task completion to problem solving and managing human relationships. And now, as the pandemic brings humans back in the forefront, CP, how is your organization redefining work to create valuable human-machine collaborations? And how has this impacted your overall talent model?
Nischay, great quote, future is already here. And couldn't agree with Karan more when he said digital dismantling. Also, we need to repurpose ourselves to unlearn. So, what is my headline at the moment? My headline is there are two learnings that one has had in the last 100 days since we have started addressing the pandemic. Number one is every employee can be a remote employee, and at least for many of us in the digital world, that has actually meant better productivity and better efficiency. Number two is that relevance of IT or how you work and how you learn has changed the way you would measure human skills. So let's look at what this pandemic has done to impact the 180 plus billion Indian outsourcing industry. And we do work with the global banks, we work for the airlines, retailers, almost all customers have realized that many a times you need a catalyst to start a reaction. And this catalyst has been the COVID-19, where employees are productive, infrastructure is being tested to its limits, and the borderless workspace is now become a reality. So it's not that the solutions did not exist. Microsoft had Teams as a product. The Cisco had telepresence as a product, WebEx as a product, and Google always had their Hangout or whatever, equivalent products were. But this co-working, this collaborative tool for each one of us to reposition ourselves, or in your opinion, what you said, redefining work from home, rethinking of the workforce, whether the workforce is going to be relevant, whether they will be able to learn, or reimagining the workplace. I mean, the bigger challenge for us when we started moving people to their homes was, do they have a table? Do they have a chair? Do they have the right laptop? And is it secure? Is there any way I need to bring in a command and control center where my clients, whether they are the banks or the post offices, know that their data is secure? So I do believe that COVID-19 is actually a game changer, particularly when it comes to future of work.
So when you talk about the pandemic, of course, one is to be able to act fast enough with urgency to be able to combat these changing forces, and that's where the concept of agility. But equally so, when you talk about remote working, do you think that there is some friction in becoming more agile because you're not now in physical proximity, and a lot of our communication takes place in physical proximity equally so? Do you see any tension or any friction in becoming more agile but remaining remote?
I mean, Nishcha, there are few parts to this equation. And I think you covered it to some extent when you gave the preamble on human plus technology. The human part is, so I'll just narrate a quick story. I met this young girl in my office and I stopped to say hello and was it difficult coming back to work? She said actually she was looking forward to coming back to work because a 9-year-old son assumes if mom is at home, all the time is for the son. He said, similarly, my mother-in-law was happily running the house. Now that I'm home, she wants to give me space. She wants to give me freedom. And she wants me to decide where the central processing unit called kitchen, how it will operate. And similarly, she said, my husband once in a while would make that request that you make this great dish. Why don't you make it? Now, people don't realize that I happen to be in a physical domain called home, but I'm really not home. I am at my workplace. I think there is a bit of a, what I would say, adoption to be done. There is a change management to be done, but this is all temporary. Important part is that you need to learn what makes you effective and what allows you to remain effective uh, 8 hours later also. So I'll give you an example. I actually called up Karan one day. We were talking about something and I said, listen, Karan, I don't know how you work. It's been 8 hours, 9 hours in front of the screen and my brain has become a faluda. I'm sorry for the users who don't know faluda. I mean, it is the spaghetti. So, and Karan said he will send me the Fitbit statistics of his, where he said that since morning, he has also done 8 hours of calls, but he's also done 14,000 steps. So I guess many of us will adopt. Many of us will relearn, but important part is like when you operate an industrial machine, you have to look at the advantages of that industrial machine, but you have to take a course in safety. So I believe uh, working from home is that new machine. That new machine has to be safe, cyber secure, and more importantly, we also learn the tools that we are going to use and don't allow the tools to use us.
Great point. Actually, I love the example of the Fitbit because that's as as personal as one can get. Right, it's helping an individual maintain physical, mental health while being productive at work as well. Interestingly, human and machines can complement each other, and this is a research by Accenture that said that the collaboration could increase revenue by 38% by 2022. And at least 61% of business leaders agree that the intersection of human and machine collaboration is going to help them achieve their strategic priorities faster and more efficiently. Now, organizations are actively embracing the new normal, as we've just discussed, by reimagining when and where the work gets done, from time-bound, traditional co-located spaces to those that are flexible and completely distributed via virtual media. This has led to a surge in the adoption of remote working, digital learning, and collaboration tools. And Google Meet, interestingly, was made free to everyone so they can connect to all their important meetings. As of April, Google Meet saw more than 3 million new users, connecting every day, spending over 3 billion minutes a day together. That's a massive 30x jump from the numbers we saw earlier in January 2020. Karan, you also recently surpassed 6 million paying businesses and organizations who use G Suite. How are organizations leveraging and benefiting from these tools? And what challenges more so are they facing?
Sure. So Nischay, you've touched on a few things, and I'll try and respond to all of those. But let me first start with this point on the new normal, as it is now famously called. And I always have been saying over the last 3 months that, yep, it's a new way of working. This is not something any of our BCPs were ready for. We adjusted, accommodated. All of us are working in the new normal. The real opportunity for us, Nischay, is that as things get back to status quo, in the sense that we get back to stability around the environment, I think the opportunity for us is to not go back to the old way of working, but to really embrace the new normal in the truest sense and see how can we fundamentally change the workplace and how we work. Each one to its own, but the opportunity for every CEO, every leader is to go back to their offices and put everything at the table and not take anything off it unless they have decided that possibly the old way was the better way. That's the real opportunity. Now, coming on to how organizations are leveraging these tools, and what really is happening. I think it's important to understand that people are at the core of everything that we have to think around in this new normal, as you said. Everyone's engineered differently when it comes to working from home. Everyone's environment is not the same. CP spoke about the fact people may not even have a nice table to work from, a decent table to work from. The hours have gone up. There is very less space now at home, and the lines between work and home are really blurring. Those lines have gone away actually. Uh, and then again, CP spoke about digital. Digital is not new, but in the past, digital was a part of the strategy. It is now the strategy. It is extremely challenging to work remotely, especially when you've been used to working face to face. Organizations across the landscape are doing a good job, I would say, of quickly adapting to the collaborative tools, especially video conferencing, that has really now come to be the mainstay and the lifeline of our ability to work together. You spoke about Google Meet, and yes, as we saw, we were fortunate enough that we had the technology. We were able to get to 100% work from home, but not most organizations were fortunate enough to do that. So we really went out and thought this is a time to serve and not sell. So we actually went out and said Google Meet, which is the platform for video, we actually made it free for all businesses and all consumers for a certain period of time up till September, so that people are able to embrace this technology. And that's why we saw the spurt that we did in terms of usage. So really the theme in our mind was, how do we democratize technology? And
So
that is how we went out.
So if you have the technology and you know how to use it, do you see any other challenges specific? I mean, mindset change,
Absolutely.
of course. What are the other challenges specifically that organizations are grappling with? One is to buy the technology or avail of free technology that organizations such as yours are making available. But there must be more to it, right?
Technology is just, as I said, the foundational element. It's a non-negotiable. You can't do without technology in this time. But there are many more nuances of people working from home for extended period of times. It is so easy to overlook the things that help cultivate connection and keep people motivated. Things that we saw in the offices, teams working together, the corridor chatter, the cooler conversations. Those things can easily get ignored. As I said, we were lucky that we had the technology, so we could enable remote working. But I believe that this is the time that investing in people is more critical than ever before, to really foster that inclusive and resilient environment that can make it easy for your employees and businesses to really navigate this uncertainty. We've been an advocate of flexible working, for example, working from home for a long time. The number of practices we put in place to establish a successful, flexible working environment. I remember we had worked with an organization called TimeWise, which is a leading flexible working consultancy to shape our approach and policy. So we were a little ahead of the curve. These are things that have enabled us to now really engage with our workforce. You've got to be very mindful of the health of your people. The mental health of your people is the nuance that all of us are waking up to now, a very harsh reality that we should be very mindful of, and organizations all are doing things to address both those issues. In my view, there are three guiding principles that we are following to stay connected in this uncertainty. Number one, focus on people first. It's, yes, technology is the key, but focus on people first. Create a very regular communication rhythm with your people, and concentrate heavily on morale and team culture. Those are the three things I would sort of say are the mainstay, while technology is the given. And I explained to you how we have democratized technology. And coming back to CP's point, when he said there was this gentleman who asked his wife to cook something, I would just ask the gentleman to go look. There is a wonderful tool called Google, and there's a wonderful tool called YouTube. Go search, cook that dish, and serve it to your wife while she's working.
Yeah, we're all falling in love with food again. Okay, that gives me a great cue to transition to the third part of our conversation, which is really learning at the speed of business. And very rightly, you pointed out that this is perhaps the best time to invest in your people, emotionally, from a knowledge skill standpoint, from a mental well-being standpoint. And clearly, if the rate of learning is not greater than the rate of change, then you're experiencing, then you're bound to fall behind. And the World Economic Forum, did this interesting study that while the foreseeable loss of jobs may amount to 75 million in the next 5 years owing to technological disruption, another 133 million jobs will be gained. And as jobs are being deconstructed, redesigned, and retooled, Karan, what in your view are the top future skills individuals need to equip themselves with to survive in this new age of work?
I will not give you that cliched answer of technology skills, but I think I'd like to address this differently. I've been now working for 32 years and I've seen the workplace change. I've seen the workplace evolve extremely, from where it was 30, 32 years ago to where it is now. It's unrecognizable. And my conviction is it will further be, that change will 10x in the next couple of years. That's really how I see. One of the most impactful studies that I have seen around the future work skills was actually published by the Institute for Future and the University of Phoenix Research. And those sort of, those resonated very well with me as a sum up sort of how I saw this transition happen. That study called out really about 6 key drivers and their confluence as the most important and relevant to the future of work skills. Extreme longevity, increasing the global lifespans. The increasing global lifespans are changing the nature of careers and learning. Uh, Rise of smart machines and systems and their impact on workplace automation is the second aspect. This is going to be a computational world, Nischay. There are massive increases in just the amount of digital data that is coming to us, whether it is through sensors or just the processing power that the world has at hand now. There's an absolutely new ecology when it comes to media. There's new communication tools that require a very different level of literacy. And then we have superstructured organizations, that we have to align to in a very, very globally connected world. So if I were to take these changes that have happened, these 5 or 6 big changes that have happened, let's talk about a few skills that will certainly be very important. As I said, I will not address this question from a technology standpoint. CP and I both come from a tech world, so I think it's easy to say cloud security, data, AI, ML, those are new skills. Yes, they are. But I think there's a deeper sense of the new skilling. And before I get there, I think I would say that for organizations that are going through change, for the new organizations is very different. For one that are going through change, I again say the bigger challenge is unlearning versus learning. Unlearning the past and learning the new is important. So here in my view are some of the new skills that are going to be important, and I sort of will take the liberty of quoting from that study as well. So one, I think the ability to determine a deeper meaning of or significance of what is being expressed versus the very explicit meaning. People have got to understand a very new dimension of things like resilience, things like conflict resolution, things like handling ambiguity. Those things have a very different meaning now. So the first skill is really that sense making. The second is social intelligence, your ability to connect with others in a very deep and direct way, to sense and stimulate reactions in a very and having the desired interactions in an environment where you're not literally in face to face with the person. That's kind of the second capability. Adaptive thinking, and your ability to be proficient at thinking and coming up with solutions and responses beyond that, which is based on rule-based learning that we've all been used to. If this happens, you do this. If this happens, you do this. So adaptive thinking is the next skill that is important. Cross-cultural competency, it has always been important, is important more so now. Ability to operate in different cultural settings, if you will. I spoke about the availability of high computational power in our environment. So computational thinking, ability to translate vast amounts of data and abstract concepts and to understand data-based reasoning. A lot of us have groomed ourselves in the industry through gut-based reasoning. I think we are transitioning to now data-based reasoning, and that's another skill that we have to adapt and be comfortable with in that sense. I spoke about the new media literacy, having a design mindset, ability to represent and develop tasks and work processes for desired outcomes in that sense. Virtual collaboration is a given, really. I think this is the new world that we live in. Our ability to work productively, drive engagement, and demonstrate presence as a member of a virtual team. I could shut my video off and be doing something else, and I could be completely disconnected. I lose that soft engagement, looking in the eyes of the person and making myself real. I think those are skill sets that I would say are more important in today's time than the hard skills of learning new technology, Nischay.
So without getting in the debate of what's more important, I think what you've really called out is the importance of soft skills and emotional skills. And many of these skills have always existed. Daniel Goleman, the father of EI, actually called out much of what you've talked about. I guess the application is different because the context has transformed significantly. For those that are interested in where the jobs will get created, I'll just take that liberty. And in fact, Microsoft and LinkedIn just talked about increased job capacity of 145 million between 2020 and 2025. And many of these roles will be created in software development and cloud and data roles. Okay, moving on. And, we have two CEOs from tech companies, and very heartening to hear that people are at the heart of this transformation. But I do want to pick up a question which may be provocative, but I'll take that liberty of doing so. And during these recessionary periods, like such as the one that we are going through, budgets are the first to take the brunt of it. That's just the reality. Now, with decreased spend on learning, just assume that there is a decreased spend on learning. CP, what steps do you believe an organization can take to ensure the sustenance of a healthy learning ecosystem and to ensure that people always remain at the front and center and we continue to invest in them?
So, Nishchay, I'll first try and re-emphasize, particularly for companies like Tech Mahindra, the only product we have is people. And if I have to build a competitive advantage, I can only build it by making my associates, my people, a lot more relevant and, more importantly, motivated to go and dismantle or help the customers redesign their processes. Now, one can easily fall into a trap, which I consider that the Indian university system has got into, where they assume that if they have taught a language or a database or a skill, it is all related to technical skills. I think when I design or I work with my teams to look at TechChem next, I'm not looking at how much of consumption of those platforms has increased. It's very natural. If you're sitting at home, you're going to enroll yourself for one master class or the other. The class could be run by Udemy or Edcast, or which I saw your T-shirt. That's why I'm saying Edcast. The point I'm trying to make here is that it's very natural that you will try and develop skills. And particularly, everybody will read the same NASSCOM Future Skills report. Everybody will read the same Microsoft LinkedIn report. I think the biggest favor we can do to each other is by allowing people to learn by doing, allowing people to showcase their expertise, allowing people to engage with experts, and in a lot of ways, help them build variety of scenarios where they can solve problems. It's very easy for me to start saying, because now Karan is the MD of Google, so there will be more opportunities in, let us say, cloud orchestration or cloud migration. I think we need to take a more human-centric approach where all of us realize that innovation and the possibilities of technology and the requirements of business, they all need to mesh together. And if we know how to understand and solve problems, how we are able to think critically, how we are able to balance between the left brain and the right brain, I think that is the skill I want my team to develop. And there is no shortage of budget, because I know those skills where they can be a little ambidextrous will help them and hence help the company.
Great. Very positive and heartening to hear that, CP. I wish the reality were different across the board, but nonetheless, it can be a source of inspiration for others watching this. Now, uh, how have your own learning behaviors transformed in the post-COVID world? And what role can leadership play in shaping learning attitudes? Karan, let's start with you and then to CP.
Sure. I think this is, I'll address this at a more personal level, if you will, Nishay. Um, I think my view is this time has demolished all assumptions I had around working and learning. I was very traditional, I must confess. I was very traditional in my thought around work from home. Actually, I'll again say that I had this, and some of the people who work with me know this. I've been saying this pretty often that working from home is like sleeping in office. You don't sleep in office, and how do you work at home? So that assumption's been demolished, Nishchay, completely. I'm able to work from home way more productively than I've ever been in my life. I'm putting way more number of hours. But that's one dimension. I've also been able to learn new skills. And within that same time I had, CP in Jess spoke about, he and I were chatting about this whole walking. When the COVID had just set in, there was this thing about not going out of your home. So we were walking in balcony. So I took a challenge of walking 10K steps in the balcony. Then I upped the ante and said 15K. And finally, I was averaging 20K steps every day in the balcony. So that was like we were able to find time. I would do my conference calls and I'd be walking. I would find time to do that. I had a long-standing aspiration to learn golf. I literally can walk into the golf course, and I never found time for that. I have learned golf now over the last 3 months, and I didn't know anything to cook other than a cup of tea. I am now a pretty good cook. So I
Did you
learned these
learn,
three skills.
did you learn golf over a computer game or did you actually
Oh
go to
no,
the golf course?
no. I was fortunate, and I was fortunate. I can literally walk into the golf course, so I was able. There's no traffic there, so you can literally play alone. So I learned in the driving range, and I was able to do it alone. So I think it's a question of finding the right balance. This
So
has
let me
totally
ask,
changed our learning.
there's one thing that it concerns me, and a lot of people have voiced that, is this aspect of being able to switch off, right? The physical movement from a workplace to home signaled that you are now completing work and going home. So that leisurely time, that ability to switch off and wind down, people are finding it very difficult, and that's leading to disturbed sleep, perhaps even a burnout. Have you heard that, and how is that being dealt with?
It's always existed, Nischay. People who've not been able to balance were not able to do it pre-COVID, they're not able to do it now. So I think it's a very personal thing. The switch between work and life is not a physical thing, it's a mental thing. So I don't think that
Well,
that
it was
issue
a
has
trigger.
been
I mean, there was
compounded.
a trigger nonetheless, right? It kind of at least gave you a
Sure.
sense of moving away from one environment and going to the other. And I agree with you, right?
Well,
People have been able to do that very naturally, and some people struggle. But the people who are struggling, that's even worse.
I am a strong believer that work-life balance is a very personal thing. You have to find your own balance yourself. Unless somebody is doing something to demolish that, that's a very different problem to handle. But other than that, it's yours to fix for yourself and find the time space and the mind space to do what you have to do within the 24 hours that you get. So I think that's a very personal thing in my mind.
CP, what's your take on that? So, how have you personally dealt with COVID, your own learning habits, and this entire phenomena of people working too hard and perhaps much too hard during this recessionary period?
So, Nishcha, as a CEO of 125,000 people, where I represent them, you were right in one of your assumptions that a certain way people learn from each other. And in a lot of ways, we as leaders have a responsibility to be those role models. So my diary gets published internally in the company, and the diary always reads 7:30 to 1 o'clock. I'm available for calls. Between 1 to 3 is my lunch time and switch off time. Unless there is a customer situation, I don't take any calls from 1 to 3. Uh, Then similarly, I have a period which is used to be 6 to 7, which have now moved because of summers to 8 to 9. That is my exercise time. So 1 to 3 is switch off time. 8 to 9 now is in the evening. My what is my personal fitness regime. So submission here is, if this diary is being read by anyone, they know that I can also be a slave of the video conferences, but I've chosen to create time for myself. I learned it by hit and trial. I asked the same question to somebody else. Uh, how do you discipline yourself? And he said, listen, I wear the same clothes, I wear shoes, and then go into my study because I want to feel that I'm at a workplace. Now, different people have their own ways of adopting. My submission here is that there are 2 or 3 things that as a leader I can signal. Number one is, what is my work-life balance? Number two, I can signal is that I am a lifelong learner. And people know the books that I read. People know how I'm augmenting my own capabilities so that I am a lifelong learner. And number third is, I always say the best way to actually relive your life is to think like a child.
Great point.
Think like a child. How did you learn to ride a bike? How did you learn to talk? How did you, uh, get down from your bed the first time? As long as you remember that as a tiny bundle of 7 kgs or 10 kgs was able to improve every day, I think we as leaders need to know that uh, our customers expect us to be better. Our own peer group expects us to be better. Whether you choose YouTube to learn cooking or whether you can use the same YouTube to learning the new testing methodology. I mean, the content is now available, and my job is to encourage them to become lifelong learners.
Great. A couple of gems, actually. Super insights, CP. Thanks for sharing them. One, of course, responsibility lies with the individual. I mean, it's important to assume that and take that head on. Of course, people require help and support, and we should provide that enablement to them where required. The second, and if I can share one of my lessons from the COVID, is minimalism. In fact, we consume a lot less than we have. And I think in the spirit of sharing one of my key lessons, I'd want to volunteer that to you. A third insight that I'd perhaps like to volunteer here is, during these times, what we've also found is that the millennials, and in fact, it's been now christened as Generation R, is a set of people. Actually, it's not divisive by age. So let me take that back. It's a generation that has learned a lot more and is far more optimistic during these times than the others. And that's perhaps going to be the ones that will survive and thrive during and post the COVID era. My final question to the two of you is your one key message for women in technology.
I guess, Nishad, number one is, I've always respected women because if you remember, I said the environment that I want to create is a little more ambidextrous, little more, self-motivated or self-initiated. I also said is that if you have personal interest, we will create an environment for you for personal development. And what I have noticed during my career is that a woman is better at handling multiple challenges, and hence they come up with a point of view where critical thinking and alternate thinking become a norm. And number three is, in a lot of ways, that human engineering quotient, that empathy or the emotional connect. Most of the people, uh, particularly women, do have an edge over individuals uh, like me. So I always believe that it is not women in technology. I think it is women in leadership is what I salute. And the more we do it, we are giving a more competent person its due. And I would love to, continue to be the ambassador who salute women in leadership, women in technology.
Karan, your message.
Yeah, I would say that the new ways of work and the new workplace, and I hope it stays, it doesn't go back to the old, it stays partly the way it is, offers an unprecedented opportunity, especially for women to break down the barriers that have existed because of the balance everyone's got to do. I think I will leave just one simple message. There are no barriers. Go on, learn the new skills, and the future is yours.
Great. And with that, we call it a wrap to this very exciting, full of insights panel discussion. Uh, the COVID world requires not only a better version of ourselves, but also a different version of ourselves. And with that thought, I'd like to thank CP and Karan, simply fantastic. The participants couldn't have asked for more. To the participants, keep learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gurnani, Mr. Bajwa, and Mr. Suri.